Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin on the Twitters, here to bring you the Falcons versus Panthers Week 6 game preview. Mini buys taking its toll. No, welcome back, guys, to the show. Excited to get you a preview of what on paper looks like maybe not that great of a game, but it is a critical game for the Falcons because this is a divisional matchup. Yes, the Panthers are technically the 32nd of 32 team in the NFL in many statistical categories. We're going to get into that. It's also a divisional game. These games are very important, and the Falcons just need to stack W's. So this is never, a game that you could be taking lightly. It's a divisional opponent. You got to secure these wins. But if the Falcons do get this W, they will go up to 4-2, 2 games above 500, with a perfect 3-0 record in the NFC South, which is absolutely fantastic to be. It'd be a great place to be, approaching the midpoint of the season with a perfect divisional record and 2 games above 500. That's what we're hoping for, because Falcons got some tough games coming up before they get to that sort of softer final stretch of their schedule. So I think this is an important game, maybe not exciting, maybe an opportunity for the Falcons to sort of get right in some areas, maybe an opportunity for the pass rush to come alive. That'd be nice to see. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, we're going to get into the matchups, check in on the injury report so far, and give you guys an update on all that stuff as we break this game down. Real quick, before we get started, I want to bring you guys a word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. And if you're betting on this game right now, I believe the Falcons are currently 6-point home favorite, 6-point road favorites over the Panthers, which is, notable because usually you get roughly 2 points for being at home. So the Falcons are favored by about a touchdown here. I think that's pretty fair. While the Falcons, I think, are clearly better than the Panthers in pretty much every area, they haven't managed to win any games by more than a score. They've just kind of always done that. Now, this could be a good opportunity to do that, and so I would be a little bit hesitant about betting on the spread in this game, just because I think the chances of blowing out the Panthers are somewhat high. I would stick to money line this one if you're going to bet on the Falcons, which I usually don't recommend. Money line the Falcons in this one. Don't take the chance on that spread. I think that's probably the safer play, but if you want to be aggressive, if you want to be bold, go for it. And if you want to do it, BetOnline's got every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. If you think you know your stuff, you can get in on BetOnline's new $200,000 mega contest. You pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of that $200,000 prize. And when the game's over, you can head on over to BetOnline's online casino, get in on that game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 different slots games available there. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to that website today, betonline.ag, to get in on the action. And when you sign up, make sure to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. To get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. So to start this one off, let's take a look at the Panthers and the Falcons injury reports. So far, only have Wednesdays. Recording this Thursday afternoon. So by the time you hear this, probably will have heard about Thursday, but we'll just have to, we won't, either way, we're not going to have the designations. So definitely check back Friday afternoon to see the final designations on these players. But from what we see right now for the Falcons, the one guy that seems to possibly be in jeopardy of missing another game would be Troy Anderson at linebacker. He was a DNP on Wednesday. We know it's a pain management thing with Troy. I think especially with the chance that Nate Landman could be coming back, more on that in a second, they're probably not going to rush Troy back. They know, he exploded basically right before his injury. And I think they realize that he's going to be a core piece of this team going forward. So they're probably not going to take any risks with him, especially if they're getting some more linebackers back this week. But we'll monitor that. That this team has been pretty cautious with resting players, especially in the early practices. So we'll see if Troy can improve that practice status at all as the week goes on. After that, speaking of Nate Landman, Landman was designated to return off IR earlier this week, and he did officially participate in his first practice on Wednesday. He was limited with a calf/quad injury. He hasn't practiced, obviously, since the injury in the Week 1 game. He was placed on IR prior to Week 2, so we'll see. They may not want to rush him back either. He hasn't really practiced in like over a month. So, we'll see how quickly he's able to get back, and see how that sort of practice status improves as we get into the weekend. But the fact that he is practicing is, potentially means that he could be back on Sunday, and that would be great against a Panthers team that's going to want to run the ball. It's kind of their thing, kind of the only thing right now for them, unfortunately. D. Alford suffered a concussion in week 5 against the Bucks. He missed most of the game. I think it was pretty early in the game that he got it. However, he is already practicing on Wednesday, so that means he's in the final stages of the protocol. Hopefully that means he's not having any more symptoms and he's feeling a lot better. Definitely don't want to mess around with concussions ever. So we'll see how that improves. But the fact that he's practicing on Wednesday is a really good sign that he's going to be able to suit up for Sunday. Matthew Judon limited with a hamstring injury. He's kind of been in this spot before. I think it's probably mostly rest for him. I'm sure he's dealing with something because most guys are at this stage of the season. Hopefully that just continues to improve to full as we get through the week. But again, vested veteran, not necessarily needing to have full practice reps every single time. Then Darnell Mooney pops up with a knee injury. He was limited as well. Again, I don't think there's any reason to be concerned. He's probably just a little banged up. So we'll just watch for that participation to improve to full over the course of the week. So that's where the Falcons are at. The Panthers list is a lot longer, with a lot more starters not participating. So going to go down from the top here, starting with the DNPs. Panthers center Austin Corbett. I think it's believed that he is going to miss significant time with a biceps injury. He hasn't been placed on IR yet, so they're still tracking his status, but I do believe he's probably going to be placed on IR this week, so we'll see how that develops, but I don't think there's much chance of him playing. Linebacker Josie Jewell, starting linebacker for the Panthers. He was also a DNP with a hamstring/groin injury. That sounds very uncomfortable. So he's one to monitor. Taylor Moton ended up leaving the game last week with an elbow injury. He also was a DNP on Wednesday, so his status seems to be in jeopardy. Center Andrew Rame, who I believe was the backup center, he has a concussion, and he was a DNP on Wednesday, so that's definitely one to monitor because they're already down their starting center. Tight end Tommy Tremble also has a concussion. He did not participate on Wednesday. Starting edge rusher Jadeveon Clowney, who was kind of like their one edge rusher right now that's producing. He has a shoulder injury and was also a DNP. So a lot of starters not practicing to start the week for Carolina. We'll see if any of those guys improve as we go into the weekend. There's 2 limited players, both starters as well. Deontay Johnson, who's basically the Panthers passing offense at this point. He's their number 1 receiver. He was limited with an ankle injury. So again, he was limited last week and ended up playing. So I assume this is probably the same thing, but one to watch for sure. And then Ashawn Robinson, who's been one of the Panthers' only productive defensive linemen, was limited with an ankle as well. And then a couple guys that were full, just kind of maintenance injuries. Ike Ekwonu, their left tackle, with an elbow was full. Dane Jackson at corner was full with a hamstring. Xavier Legette, the rookie receiver, was full with a shoulder. And then Ian Thomas, the tight end, full with a calf. So we'll have to watch how that develops. But at this point, the Panthers are really banged up. Again, I'm pretty sure that's their center's not going to play. I would be surprised if Moton is able to suit up. He's an Ironman for sure, so I'm sure he will try, but he did leave the game. He did leave the game on Sunday with that elbow injury and did not return, so probably a dicey situation there, but that would leave the Panthers down 2 starters and possibly down a backup as well, and Andrew Rame, who I believe was the backup center. I would have to check. I know Brady Christensen ended up playing and did not look great. So we'll see how that goes. But Jadeveon Clowney, obviously huge as well, kind of one of their only productive defensive linemen at this stage. So, this is a bad spot, obviously, for the Panthers with these injuries stacking up. So that's the injury report so far. We're going to now move on to checking out how this Falcons offense is going to match up against the Panthers defense. All right, so looking at this Falcons offense against this Panthers defense, we're used to this Panthers defense kind of being the only thing propping up the Panthers from being like an 0-16 team, so like the last year or two. it's typically been good even when the offense has struggled, but that is no longer the case. The Panthers obviously lost Derek Brown pretty much immediately this year, and he's their best defensive player, so that's a massive loss that was going to hurt no matter what. They also traded away Brian Burns. They let I believe Dante Jackson walk. They don't really have much else, and they've got injuries as well. Shaq Thompson is on IR. So their linebacking core is very, very thin as well. So this Panthers defense is 32 right now in terms of scoring. They're a little bit better in yards. I think they're 28. But yeah, ultimately this Panthers defense has been really quite bad. And it's, this is an opportunity for the Falcons obviously to come in and put up some points on the road. And I think that's, one thing that we're obviously going to be looking at is, can the Falcons really just take it to a defense? They definitely took it to the Bucs, but they ended up, of course, having to win that game in overtime because the Falcons defense for a change was not as dominant, especially in the first half. Things did improve, and Atlanta won. And honestly, Atlanta dominated the stats in that game. Of course, had to sweat it out because of some miscues, led to some missed scoring opportunities, but we're not going to dwell on that game anymore. You look at this Panthers team, and right now, they're not really having success anywhere. I would say like the one area where they're probably a little bit better than people think is that they're actually okay in terms of like yards per attempt allowed. They're 11th right now. They only allow 4.3 yards per attempt, but they're getting run on at like the highest rate in the NFL. So they're still 27th in yardage and 32nd in the NFL in rushing touchdowns allowed with 9 so far. So I think the run defense actually isn't terrible. They've just had to deal with the volume. So that's why I always encourage people to look at the per attempt stats to really get a closer picture of what's going on there. But the pass defense is horrible. That is probably what's going to cause this team the most problems. And the numbers really should be a lot worse, but it's the inverse basically of what I just talked about with the run defense. The Panthers have faced the 7th fewest passing attempts, obviously because they're getting blown out all the time and teams are just running the ball. But even with that few pass attempts, they're 22nd in yards allowed, 31st in passing touchdowns allowed, and 31st in the all-important, stats that takes into context the amount of attempts. They are 31st in net yards per attempt, allowing 7.6 at this stage. So this passing defense is the absolute, this is arguably the worst passing defense in the NFL. So I think, the Falcons, I assume, are going to try to get the run going, but I think if they end up having to rely on the passing game again, this is a defense that can absolutely be had there. And, you look at this group up and down, and the defensive line is really bad, especially if Clowney's not playing. I'm not sure who's going to play for him. They've already had a lot of, probably DJ Johnson, who I think is actually back, but they just have no depth. They brought in Charles Harris, who's already starting for them. And he's been bad, quite bad. They've got LeBron Ray, and A'Shawn Robinson, who I like. I think he's a quality run defender, but like they don't really have any depth. They don't really do much on that defensive line. And so that puts their linebackers in a bad spot. And right now they've got Trevin Wallace, the rookie 3rd rounder, out there playing. And Josie Jewell was the other star. It was Josie Jewell and Shaq Thompson, both those guys potentially missing this game. Obviously, Shaq Thompson's on IR. So I believe the other guy would be Claudin Sherilis, UDFA from Alcorn State, who played a handful of snaps. And I think he played something like 50 snaps in this one last week, and was okay. So maybe he'll be all right. But again, it's like the depth there is absolutely gone as well. So tough spot there to throw a UDFA and a rookie into against this Falcons offense, which seems to finally be finding life. I think Xavier Woods still a very solid safety, especially against the run. But Nick Scott, who the Panthers went out and got this offseason, has been, I think, a huge disappointment for them. He's been pretty bad and been on the receiving end of a lot of highlight plays. So that's been pretty rough. So, this is a game, obviously, where I think the Panthers' strength is that they still have J.C. Horn. He's maybe the best player on their defense right now. So he's still going to be a guy that's going to be able to do well against one of the receiving options. But my guess is the Falcons, now that they've seen that they have London, they have Mooney, and they have Ray McLeod, who they all feel pretty confident in, and then Kyle Pitts, hopefully, especially with their linebackers and safeties underperforming. This could be like whoever's on J.C. Horn, we're just not really going to test, and we're going to go after the other guys, and that would be like Mike Jackson, who I think is solid as a corner too, but nothing particularly special. And then we got Troy Hill, who is, again, kind of average slot corner. So their secondary, itself, especially the corners, aren't that bad. But, we saw Kirk Cousins pick apart a much better cornerback group last week, with Zion McCollum, who was PFF's number one corner, Jamel Dean as well there. The Falcons really picked apart that group. And I think that, especially, the Panthers don't have the defensive line that the Bucs do either. So, this is an opportunity for this Falcons team to really try to establish the run. I think that's the one thing they haven't really been able to do since the first 2 weeks. The run game has become really predictable with the outside zone. That's exactly what bogged them down last year. So maybe this is the week where they're like, okay, we're going up against a defense that is not very good. They got a bunch of replacement linebackers in there. They have no depth on the interior. Let's just wear these guys down, and we'll try to lean more on the ground game if we can. And then if we need to go back to the air attack, we will. But yeah, I mean, Caleb McGarry should be a little bit healthier this week. He's off the injury report, so that's nice to see. He was clearly still kind of getting back into it last week. So hopefully he's back to his run blocking prowess. Chris Lindstrom, obviously great. Jake Matthews, Matthew Bergeron, I think as a pass blocker, Bergeron's taken a big step forward. As a run blocker, still a work in progress. But again, I think Bergeron's a guy that would really benefit from some gap scheme runs. He's big, 6'5", 320. We've seen him pull really well. And Nuzul as well. Nuzul, I think, has been, again, a solid pass protector. The run blocking has not been very good. So, I would like to see some more variety to the run game, because I think that's a way that the Falcons can attack this Panthers defense, which, again, this is the biggest weakness of this Panthers team, surprisingly, given the struggles of the offense. But we will get to the Falcons defense versus the Panthers offense in just a moment. So the Panthers offense, we saw, obviously, what happened to this offense with Bryce Young. It was completely non-functional, and Bryce Young had a lot to do with that, clearly. The offense with Andy Dalton has not been as bad, certainly. They did have that one sort of explosion game against the Raiders, who we know are probably not, a great team, but they put up 36 points against the Raiders. Then they come out the next week. They do put up 24 points against the Bengals. We also know that the Bengals, are in the running for the worst defense in the NFL. The Panthers are 32nd. The Bengals are 31st. And then last week they go up against a Chicago Bears team that actually has, a pretty solid to good defense. I believe they're 5th in points against right now. And they get shut down and basically blown out. And that Bears offense, up until this game against the Panthers, was really not doing a whole lot. My fantasy team was certainly happy that they came alive that week. So, this Panthers offense is not as bad as they were the first couple of weeks. I will say that I think their strength is they can run the ball. And Chuba Hubbard, I think is perennially underrated running back. The Panthers just keep trying to replace him, and he's good. They signed Miles Sanders, who's really not good. And I was like, wow, that's a waste of money. And Chuba Hubbard was way better than him. And then they draft a running back high again. I just feel like I find what's wrong with Chuba Hubbard. I don't get it. Interesting allocation of resources by the Panthers. But yeah, Chuba Hubbard and their run game is their strength. They want to lean on that. Their offensive line is pretty good at run blocking. That has been their strength so far. The pass blocking has been inconsistent, but the run blocking has been pretty good. So, that's the one way that this Panthers team probably can squeeze out some wins, is if they can get up on teams like the Raiders, for example, and just pound the rock and play the game that way. that's the way that this team will win games. They'll probably win a few doing that. But this team can't come back, if they get down. So that's really what the Falcons have to do, is they have to basically get out. If the Falcons can get to an early lead, then I think we will see this Panthers team really struggle. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think you look at the matchups in this one. There's a clear, I think, mismatch on the offensive line versus the Falcons' defensive line. Again, we haven't really seen this Falcons defensive line do a whole lot. I do think Onyemata is starting to get to where we need him to be, which is great. Judon, we still really haven't seen it consistently. His flash plays have been very critical. Obviously, the blocked pass that ended up being a pick 6 for Troy Anderson was huge. He had a couple sacks early in the season, kind of quiet since then. We really need Judon to get involved more. And right now it's we need to take Lorenzo Carter off the field. He's the worst edge rusher in PFF's database right now. He's 113 out of 113. Just abysmal against the run. At this point, I think he's unplayable. And he's good in coverage. He is good in coverage, but he offers just nothing right now against the run. And this Panthers team is going to pound the rock. So the Falcons need to find another solution, another option. I mean, Arnold Ebiketie been playing the run better, and Arnold Ebiketie's 10, 15 pounds lighter, maybe. I mean, I don't know. So at this stage, we can't keep using Lorenzo Carter as a starter. He's just been very, very disappointing. It's unfortunate, but I think the hope obviously is that maybe we could get Caden Ellis out there at edge. If Troy Anderson's able to come back, and Nate Landman's ready to come back, then we'll probably see a lot more Caden Ellis playing edge. But until those guys are out there together at the same time, probably not going to see that change happen. So, if I'm the Falcons, I'm probably just all right, it's time for James Smith-Williams to play over Carter, and then we can rotate in Ebiketie, and then Carter will sort of be just a depth guy. At this point, I'd go to D'Angelo Malone. Obviously, they were hoping Braylon Trice was probably going to be that starter opposite Judon, at least at some point this year. But yeah, to me, I think at this stage, we should see Ebiketie or James Smith-Williams. Good run defender. I would probably go with James Smith-Williams, and just let him play on early downs. Swap out Ebiketie. But yeah, we knew this edge room was going to be a problem in a bad way, right? And it is a problem. We need more from Judon too. And then on the interior, I think that's another place where, especially if the Panthers are down to their third string center, that's a spot that you want to attack. Obviously, Grady Jarrett's specialty used to be going against that center and dominating. Onyemata too. So, I would go to that. I think if we can get more. I think we need to see more Rook. I think Rook as a run defender was really, really impressive last week, and we know the Panthers are going to pound the rock. So I would get Rook out there on early downs to help stuff the run. Then let Grady play on passing downs. He doesn't need to be playing 60+% of snaps, 70+% of snaps. He needs to be our pass rush ace. Keep him fresh. Let him get out there in pass rush situations. Don't make him play like a 3-4, defensive end role down there. I don't think that's really his strength at all. He's just getting blown off the ball there. So I think we should probably move Jarrett to more of a pass rush specialist role. I think he could be really successful there. They did get Contavious Street out of the rotation, so good. Great job there, guys. But we need to see more Zach Harrison. We need to see more Rook. And we need to see Jarrett probably have his snaps dialed back a bit to be more of that pass rush specialist. And then again, Taquan Graham, he's been playing great too. I believe he's the highest graded interior guy for the Falcons right now. Get these young guys in more on early downs. Let your big pass rush winners like Onyemata and Jarrett, keep those guys fresh. They don't need to be dominating the snap count. When you've got a defensive line this deep, you need to rotate. You need to get these guys, keep everybody fresh. Don't make Jarrett go out there and play that many snaps if he's not at 100%. So let him focus on his pass rush, penetration style stuff that he does really well, or go to more 4-3 sets, right? If you want Jarrett out there on early downs, play him in the 4-3. He's good at that, but I think the 3-4 with him trying to take on blocks and stuff, that's just not his game. It's never been his game. So I think, that should be a spot. Like, the Panthers offensive line is not terrible, like, to be clear. Like, I think Ike Ekwonu started off the season pretty rough. It's been better lately. So I think he's doing okay. Taylor Moton is probably their best offensive lineman. If he doesn't play, then right tackle becomes a problem, because Josh Nijman is a journeyman, swing tackle type. He's okay, but definitely not a boost like Taylor Moton is. And then Robert Hunt's very good right guard. Like, I mean, much respect there. So he's someone that's probably going to get his. But Damian Lewis, I think, is pretty mediocre as a left guard, pretty middling type guy. So they're down their center. They have a vulnerable left guard and a vulnerable right tackle potentially. You attack there and get that done. I think the Falcons, if they can get their defensive line right, especially if they get Landman back out there, like, this is a spot where this run defense could have a good game against a tough opponent. But I think Landman is apparently critical to this run defense working, but I think if he gets out there, that could be a big boost. And then looking at the Panthers passing game with Andy Dalton is functional. Like, it is functional. It's not this, black hole of production that it was before. That being said, it's still, 26th in yardage and 28th in net yards per attempt, even with 3 games of Andy Dalton. So now, obviously, the first 2 games are weighing this down a lot. I would say they're probably more like a slightly below average passing game. They're not terrible with Andy Dalton, but even so, like, this is not a terribly dynamic attack. They've got Deontay Johnson, who I think is a good wide receiver. And he's going to be productive. He's going to be a reliable guy for Andy Dalton. Their other receivers just haven't really panned out. I think Xavier Legette, he's a rookie. He's interesting, certainly. I think he's a guy that you're excited about long term. Hasn't really done a ton, and then he ended up getting hurt in week 5, so a little banged up still. He was practicing fully, though. And then Jonathan Mingo has just never really turned into anything for them, which is a shame, because I was a big fan of his in the 2023 draft, but he just hasn't really panned out. So I think they're kind of in a bad spot there. And then their tight end room is just, it's not good. Tommy Tremble, who's their starting tight end, he's, not practicing. Ian Thomas is hurt as well. So they're not getting much from the tight end position. But Andy Dalton's a solid veteran quarterback. They do have Deontay Johnson, who's probably going to draw the Terrell matchup. I mean, I don't know. I don't think the Falcons are going to care a whole lot there. They'll probably have Mike Hughes out there. They'll probably have D. Alford out there if he's ready to go. And they'll probably just be like, yeah, sure, Mike Hughes or Mike Hughes or Terrell or whatever. And Johnson can play the slot too. So we'll see. That might be the Panthers' best bet, is to try to get Johnson on D. Alford. Because Alford's been struggling a bit to start this year. Hopefully he gets it together here. I think he actually started that Bucs game really well. So hopefully that continues. But if I'm the Falcons defense, I'm making some more personnel changes, hoping to get my linebackers back in there, getting Caden Ellis more on the edge. But we got to get Lorenzo Carter out. It's becoming a big problem. He's he's hurting this defense. He's not delivering pass rush or run defense. So, I mean, James Smith-Williams has been vastly more productive on half the snaps. It's pretty sad. We need more James Smith-Williams. Well, it's not half the snaps. James Smith-Williams has only played about 30 snaps less than Lorenzo Carter. He's getting, he's starting to get more. I think Lorenzo Carter's starting to get less. So hopefully we could just swap that out altogether, get Ebiketie and James Smith-Williams more involved. Hopefully we get some more Caden Ellis, more on the edge too. Because I think if the Falcons can get Anderson and Landman back, that would be great for this week. I think we could really see this defense how it's supposed to look for a change. But even if they can just get one of those guys out there, that's going to help a lot. But J.D. Bertrand didn't have a terrible game. PFF really hated his game. I didn't think it was that bad, but again, he's a day 3 rookie starting. So, I would rather not have that. I'd rather have Bertrand be a little bit more of a depth guy at this point. And I think the Falcons would prefer that as well. So, that's the matchup. I do think this is one where I think the Falcons do win this one. I think the Falcons, obviously, I don't think that it's going to be a blowout. I also don't think it's going to be terribly sweaty. I think I see the Falcons winning this one like 30-20 roughly. I think that the Panthers aren't a terrible team with Andy Dalton at quarterback, but I think the defense is just not very good. And I think the Falcons get out to an early lead. Then they kind of take the foot off the gas a little, run the ball. I think the Panthers are capable of scoring, certainly, a little bit. But, it really just depends. Like, if the Falcons could play a clean game, they could blow the Panthers out. If they get some turnovers and that sort of thing, that's what happened, obviously, last week with the Bears. But I think that, it's a division game. It's going to be closer than most people expect. I do think that this is probably the first game that the Falcons win by more than one score, which would be great. But I don't think it's going to be like a giant blowout or anything like that. I think this Panthers team still has a lot of pride. I do think Dave Canales is a good coach. I just think they're so talent deficient, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, and especially if they're switching out a center and a right tackle. It's going to be messy. We saw how that affected the Falcons last week. So, not last week, but a couple weeks ago against the Chiefs. So, again, tough spot for Carolina. It is in Carolina, so that might help the Panthers a bit. But the Falcons have played well on the road so far, so I'm not terribly concerned about that. At this stage, just hoping for a big dub for Atlanta. Important game. Falcons can't sleep on this one. Have to go out there, play hard. To me, it's like you get this win comfortably. I'm gonna start trusting this team. I think if they blow this, then all the same questions come back, and we're right back where we started with this team at 500 and losing to the worst team in football. You can't have that and keep the positivity going. So this is an important game because this is going to tell us who this team is. Is this team just a team that's kind of middling and they're prone to blunders, or is this a team that's going to take care of business and be a real front runner in the NFC South, because that's what they'll be if they win this game. So critical game, not necessarily the sweatiest, hopefully, but an important one. So let's get it done. Let's get it done, Atlanta. But thank you guys so much for joining me here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave a comment with your thoughts on this game. You can check out the Patreon if you want to support the show. It's patreon.com/FalcoholicLive. You could also check out the channel memberships on YouTube if you're more of a video enjoyer. We'll be back on Sunday after following the hopeful Falcons victory to discuss this on our post-game show, which you can watch live on YouTube following the game. Of course, we'll have the podcast up as well pretty shortly after. And thank you guys so much for joining us here. Really appreciate you. Let's get that big dub and keep this season rolling in the right direction for this Falcons team. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, folks. And thanks again to BetOnline for sponsoring today's episode.